All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's 12 o'clock and welcome to our webinar. My name is Colin Wilson and this is Kev Perry. And we're here to do a webinar which is all around creating safer workplaces. This webinar goes for an hour and it's all about understanding, it's about to equip you with how to better manage responses to situations like incidents around violence and aggression within the workplace. So thanks for joining us today, Kev.
Thanks for having us.
And let me get started with this webinar. So I'm just the facilitator. That's what my role is of this webinar. And away we go. Let me just get this going for us. I just want to do a bit of a self-check just to make sure you can see my screen. So if you want to put something in the chat box or even in the questions area for us to see, that would be absolutely fantastic. But according to us, everything is working to a T. In today's session, what we're going to cover is identifying risk factors around occupational violence and aggression that might happen in the workplace, which we don't happen in the workplace, but this is all about awareness, yeah? And develop a violence prevention plan. We want you to think first before you react. And I've got an expert here. I'm going to introduce him in a second. He can tell us a little bit about himself and his background and ways to support and create a safer workplace. At the very end, we'll get you to put in some questions and away we go, right? So just want to make sure you can hear us, see us all right, and that'd be great if someone could put a message in the chat box. All right, so my name is Colin Wilson. Yes, we're hosting this webinar through Key Business Advisors. Love what I do. Been operating for 15 years, and I was actually referred to Kevin. So someone referred Kevin to us to come and connect together. We thought it'd be a really good connection. We're linking HR because we're an outsourced HR business along with Persec's professional services and what Kev does. The more I learn about Kev, the more interested I am about what he's got to say. And we did a bit of a trial run. So what we did is we got Kev to come to our office and run a session at our office, which my team just said it was invaluable. So I, as a business owner, have a responsibility of my staff coming to work, going home from work. They go out and visit our clients on site. And just the awareness and the training that Kev did was just amazing. So good. That's why we're doing this webinar today. So Kev, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Colin. Really appreciate the opportunity. And as you well know from the sessions that you've ran with us in trying to help us go from good to great, that our sort of mission and our values are all about creating safer workplaces. So the opportunity to try and get the message out there, we really appreciate. So thanks very much for that. So how did I get here? So I suppose I spent over 30 odd years in training, I suppose, from a policing background. I was a law instructor, I did driver training, I went from after running some of the law stuff at the academy, I went into firearms and defensive tactics, and which led me into raids, force building entries, all fairly hard sort of tasks. Then sort of softened a bit from emergency management, critical incident management, and then sort of went from that training background into the response team as a sergeant of the response team. And part of within that was some hostage negotiation, counter-terrorism stuff, which then led into suicide intervention, which unfortunately was something that I was called upon all too often. And then we went into some VIP, close person protection, looking after the premiers, prime ministers, royals, and whatnot. So that was sort of the background. And what happened was that I sort of went, all right, those skills are done. And once I left after, I think it was about 28 years, so I went, okay, great. And what else am I going to do now into a different career? And what I sort of get being drawn back because of the fact that I was watching people in workplaces and my own family in workplace situations that basically bad things were happening, and it was like they didn't know what to do. And I'm sitting here going, geez, I've got all this knowledge. I taught all these police how to be safe and other people how to be safe out and about, and they weren't getting that message. And so I sat there and thought, geez, this is something that I think is really important, not only from an OH&S, as you mentioned. OH&S, we've got legal obligations to do that, but also from just trying to make people safer. And I think that's sort of what's led me to here.
Yeah, and I think if I can say, what we did is Kev's come to me. So, the business knowledge and getting your knowledge into a packaged, if I can say a packaged service is what we've been helping you with some strategy. And it's just going like a dream. So if I've got this right, if I read this out, so your mission is to create safer workplaces, full stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And your purpose is to train people and deal with conflict in every aspect of the workplace and personal life. So even though you might do some training in personal life, in work life, which is what mainly you're doing, I can adapt this to my own personal life, my own family situation to help protect them as well.
Yeah, and so that it works in that situation, especially with that purpose there, is that it's not a switch on, we're at work, switch off. It's stuff that's generally that everyone, and unfortunately, as we said, from COVID and just the global positioning of where everyone is in the world today, that conflict and dealing with people, the anger, the road rage, the things like that, it's only getting worse. And so it's that personal responsibility, not only from a workplace and looking after staff, but from our own personal responsibility to sort of go, well, how do we look after ourselves and the people that we love?
I must admit, I do, after your training, I do let things go now when I'm on the road. Someone's, giving me the...
We'll
give me
go over that one a bit, some road rage and some how to deal with stuff on the road. Yeah, that's certainly one of the big topics that we cover.
Beautiful. So these pillars you've got here, tell us a bit about these pillars: safety, awareness, foresight, empowerment, respect. Where has that all come from?
Yeah, so obviously from... we wanted to look at, that safer. We wanted people to be safer, and so obviously our number one thing is safety. And how do we encompass that from a safety point of view? The awareness. So that's pretty much the first pillar of it, isn't it? In that to be safer, we're not going to be aware of what's going on. And so what happens is that part of the role that I do with organisations is actually looking at what they do and helping them become aware of where their blind spots, I suppose, are, or at least to sort of go, they might sit there and say, no, this is glaringly obvious. We've got an issue here with dealing with people in a violent situation, but they just don't know that next step. And you look at, a policy that might say, well, what do you do from an violence point of view? And it might be, well, avoid it. Well, that's fantastic. Absolutely, we should. But what's the background behind that? How do we avoid it? What do we do? And that's where I think a lot of organisations get stuck, and that's part of our role. Foresight, that's one of our big ones, is that how do we look forward to then prepare and have things like policies, procedures, training on how to actually solve those issues. Empowerment. So being empowered, what we sort of do is when everyone talks a bit about safety and violence and those sorts of things, what can happen is that people think about being scared. And what we want to look at is go, well, we don't want people to be scared about what's going on out there. We want them to feel empowered. And part of that is one of obviously the awareness and then the training and how we actually put all that together to make sure that people do feel empowered, not scared. And then their last pillar is respect. And I think if we look at that and as a society, as people dealing with situations, that if people treat other people with respect, and how does de-escalation work? People sort of sit there and say, well, we've got to de-escalate. Well, how do we do that? Well, part of that is people skills and being able to communicate with people. And if you always start with that positioning of respect, then we're certainly a hell of a long way down the track. So that's pretty much our...
And all of it's common sense, but unfortunately not everyone has common sense, right? So as we learn. So let's get into our first topic, which is identifying risk factors for occupational violence and aggression, right? So you're going to take us through some pieces here. So number one, lack of training and awareness. So what's this about?
Yeah, so you talk about it might be that if you looked at, say, some organisations, so I talk a bit about, say, construction, where someone would say, oh, I want you to go and do this. Or as you can see from the slide there, manual handling. We sort of seem to be in organisations really good at those hard tasks. We said, oh, I want you to climb up there and I want you to clean that window. we go, oh, hang on, we got working with heights. We want, the fall protection. We want proper footwear. We want eye protection. We want this, and we're really good at those hard sort of skills from organisations. What we sort of get is a lack of training and awareness in relation to violence and aggression, and sometimes that can be from underreporting. Sometimes she'll be right. That's just part of the job. And I think what we're starting to get is now that there's no recognised course in doing this sort of stuff. It's sort of like, well, everyone should know it. As you said, it's common sense. But I get this a lot where people say, there was nothing I could have done. And we look at it and say, sometimes there's a lot of things we could have done. And so that's part of that lack of training and awareness. So we help organisations basically fit that spot to look at it and sort of go, hey, listen, you've got some aspects of where you are at the moment that if an outside regulatory board comes in, so like a WorkSafe or touch wood, worst case, police investigations, because it's got that serious, that they would look at that and say, well, hang on, did you look at this, and this? And as an organisation, sometimes we go, geez, I didn't even see that. So that's part of what we do to help out.
Yeah, and you can see, like you're right about WorkSafe and everything. I need to have a ladder and I need to have certain heights and shoes and that sort of stuff. I totally get that.
Yeah.
And psychosocial is a big thing that's coming through. And I look at your organisation, and this is training around that. I call it that mental health aspect.
Yeah.
And making sure that people know how to deal with situations. So yeah, I've hurt my back because a foreman's asked me to go and do something. Right. So how could I have dealt with the situation? Well, I think it's too heavy for me. A bit of communication beforehand to lift, but I go and lift it, I hurt myself, and then I end up in a big argument, and it's not good for either party. Okay, beautiful. Yeah. So we'll go on to the next slide.
Yeah,
beautiful. All right. So inadequate safety measures. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So you look at that and you sit there and say, well, sometimes we talk about, well, all right, we're going to go walk from here to there after hours to get to my car. And we sort of look at it and we say, well, part of that is organisations. Or I say, what I want you to do, I want you to drive from here to there because we're going to do whatever. So there's all these risk factors that get brought up in the workplace. And sometimes we look at it, we might be, say, like a desk. We're sitting here at the desk, I'm front facing to public coming in, and I've got my computer here, which means I've got my back to where people come in. And you're looking at things like that to sit there and say, how do we get people to become more aware? How do we, and as we said, from other parts of our business, we sit there and say, yeah, we're really good at that. But from an violence and aggression point of view, we sit there and say, well, just our setup isn't great here, or hey, we haven't got enough lighting in the car park, or we've got things that are set up that we've sort of just got used to doing that hasn't really covered off on how we can help people be safer from that sort of aggression and violence in the workplace.
Yep. So if I give an example, like our team here, that we employ a lot of women in our business, right?
Yep.
So which is a wonderful thing. But sometimes they're here late at night and then they go and walk to the car.
Yeah.
Right. So like anyone on this webinar, you finish your day at work, you lock up and you walk out, and you have no situational awareness of what's going on. There might be someone walking towards you, there might be somebody following you in the distance, but I don't have that. I haven't got that in my radar because I just want to get to my car and get home and have dinner. That's what you're talking about here.
And so from like what we, as you were talking before about how it's workplace and personal, what we find is that most of the stuff within the training, I can sort of relate it to, hey, this is what happens in your workplace, but also, hey, what about this situation at home? What about here? And what about there? And it's that level of awareness and the training, and heaps of people that have done the training come up and say, this would be so good for my daughter, or this would be so good for my son, or they're going out to this and they're doing this. And so that's where we have that aspect of, hey, this is great from a workplace point of view. But even from a mental health point of view, where people feel a bit, oh, okay, great. Oh, I thought it was just me that felt like that. No, hey, this is happening to everyone. So it keeps them as that's an empowerment. Oh, hey, this isn't just me that thinks like this. Walking alone at night, catching public transport. There's so many on-flow things that this is sort of creeping into our society that, hey, if we can cover this off at work, but also help people in their after hours work life, then, fantastic. That makes me
just look what's happened the last week, 2 incidents. Like one with the car age with the young guys, and then the other with the, got out of his car.
Remind me to talk about that. We'll get to one of the other slides. We'll talk about that, and we'll sort of that whole, hey, there was nothing I could have done.
That's
where we'll have a bit of a look.
Yeah, because I every time I see that, I think of you, right? So
well, thanks,
I do, right? It's really good. So working in vulnerable occupations. So talk us a bit about that.
Okay, so there's certain parts of our working life now where we've got vulnerable occupations, and those are where you've sort of got front-facing, dealing with the public, that either you can't control the environment, as in you're going out and seeing people, you have no idea what you can't control that environment, or you're stuck in your environment, people are coming in to you and you're there. And there's plenty, and I don't know where all the people are from this are, or they're going to be looking at this from, but I can basically look at most organisations and sort of go, okay, great, this is where you're at risk. If we know you're pretty safe here at work, which is what we did with you, where we sort of sat there and said, your setup here for your staff has got a really great security setup and how that all works. So that's maybe not a vulnerable area. It's when you leave here, because you've got that sense of safety. We do stuff with schools, and you go, there's some of the schools that we've dealt with, are fantastic. They've created a very safe bubble. And so what happens is that people get relaxed and well, I can say this and I can do this and I can behave like that, and then they go out into the world and it's not the same environment. And unless they switch onto that, then it creates issues. So I think there's certainly vulnerable occupations where you're dealing with people with high stress, that are dealing with trauma, that are and there's different touch points where you might sit there and say, well, they've dealt with different people, and it might be on the phone. It might be, hey, they'll this, and this, and then all of a sudden they've come to you and they've gone, oh, key business advisors, which I know would never happen because all your staff are awesome, but there's other organisations where you sit there and you say they've had interaction, and it's then got to a point where it might be something else or something that someone else has done, but you're the brunt of that outburst. And that happens a lot where people go, geez, where did this come from? So there's certainly anyone that is dealing, like have a look at now, let's just say retail. You might sit there and say, well, that's pretty, all I do is serve people in relation to this product. But people walking past the street, you've got people that are dealing, that are addicted to drugs, alcohol, they've got issues there, you've got theft. Well, what are you going to do with that? And if you don't know what you would do in those situations, you're vulnerable.
We have a fair few clients on this webinar. Some are from the funeral industry that host funerals. You can imagine how that would be. We've got retailers, we've got people in banking, we've got professional services, we've got construction, right? And if you think about all those, I just gave you 4 industries, right? In banking, I could be in a situation where I'm at the front teller and someone comes and has a go, or waits for me afterwards, or in a funeral industry is really interesting because you might have a bit of family violence going between one family and another family, but they're the people that are hosting that funeral and they're going to try and defuse the situation. Is probably a really good thing. And in retail, like let's face it, people have got a shorter fuse today after COVID than what they did pre-COVID. So 100% right. What you're talking about is just understanding that what's around.
I think that's a really good point. I think what you find is that I know that most people that are dealing, they've got great people skills, in being able to manage that. So let's talk about, you know, the funeral situation. You're there in a time of you know, deep grief, trauma within a family organisation, and you sit there and you say, well, my role in this is to help them get through this and feel a lot better. And so you sit there and you think, well, hey, I'm doing a really great thing. Then all of a sudden you go, well, someone, oh, hang on, this is getting a bit, and there is then that issue. So then what do we do to be able to put a bit of some tactics behind your people skills? So it's not there to sort of say, well, hey, you guys don't know how to deal with it. Of course you do. You're experts at it. In a retail situation, you're experts at being able to do all that. So what we do is we're talking about how do we put a little bit of a tactics and some tools together that helps them get through that, which then is part of that avoidance.
Yep, beautiful, beautiful. All right, workplace culture and communication.
Yeah, okay. So this is where we have a lot of issues where there's that underreporting, where people say, so what is occupational violence in the workplace? And you say, well, is it harassment? Is it verbal abuse? And people go, oh, well, verbal abuse, oh, you know, that's just part of the job. And so sometimes you might sit there and say, well, that's just part of the job, or you just go, well, I'm not reporting that, so we're not going to do anything about it. And then it escalates, and then all of a sudden your ability to be able to deal with it, because you're under stress and pressure because of this happens all the time, those sorts of things are just an issue, I suppose, where you look at it and say, I think if we said, if someone slipped over at work, someone would say, oh, geez, we've got to get onto that. We make sure that floor's better. We're really good at that. Someone gets abused at work and it's sort of gone, oh, are you okay? Yeah, okay, fantastic. You'll be right. Have a great night tonight and we'll see you tomorrow. But what are the things that we put in place to actually make sure that doesn't escalate? And as you have worked in a lot of organisations, and some people are unbelievable with the workplace culture, and then being able to communicate that, and others have, you know, that could be part of the blind spot. So having a look at that and being able to manage that is one of the huge keys.
And I think we see a lot of, you know, conflict resolution is a big thing, right?
Yep.
But, you know, if I can say to everyone on this webinar, the thing that what Kev really highlighted to ourselves and our team and the work that as I get to learn more about his business, the more, if I can say, more inspired I am. But let's try and prevent before the conflict even happens, right?
Yeah.
That's the training that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a, you know, people look at it and say, oh, geez, well, you've got all these things. What are we going to do? Are we going to do some hands-on stuff? Are we going to do some of this role playing and this and that? And I sort of go, I like to approach this from more of an emotional intelligence side of things. It's not, well, can I deal with this? You know, if someone said this, could I sort them out? And you go, well, maybe you could, maybe you can't, but why even get to that point? How do we look at that from the awareness that, hey, I recognise that this is going in this way, and then how do we de-escalate that with people skills? And whilst we're doing people skills, what are the other things that we could be doing from a tactics point of view, like our positioning and what we're saying and how we do that? One of my favourites is people say, well, when someone says this, what should I say? And I sort of say, well, I don't know what you would say. And they sort of look at me like, well, geez, mate, you need to be the expert. I go, I know what I would say. I don't know what you would say, but you need to know. Because we're all different. And so we're all going to have, you know, what works for me is not necessarily going to work for you. But we just need to get to the point where you go, hey, what are the things, let's identify those, and then what are we going to do about it?
And that goes, look, we do personality profiling, right?
Yeah.
So we can see that people are going to really, you know, what's a high dominant type of person as opposed to someone's more conscientious and steadiness. And I get that. And then there's the other aspect is how you've been brought up as a family and how you've grown up, right? And then, you know, age bracket, because, you know, the older you are, the more things you've seen in life as well. So, but again, you're 100%, and we're all about, you know, creating great KBA is all about creating great workplaces.
Yeah.
You're all about creating safer workplaces. So it's
Yeah.
a really good combination. And I really hope you enjoy what we're going through in this webinar. And if you've got any questions, feel free. I know the chat box is, I don't know if that's working or not, but the question box is working. So if you've got any questions, feel free to throw some questions at us and we'll go through those at the end of this webinar. So working in a high stress environment, you know, so I think it's pretty much about everyone today. So, you know, I look at frontline staff, nurses, police officers, all the, you know, all that where they're constantly faced with angry people.
Yeah.
Right. Someone's in hospital, things aren't going right. There's frustration, and so go through a bit about the high stress environments. Yep.
Yeah. So you look at it from a workplace. So you look at it and say there's stressful, as you said, this. And people talk about, the first responders, your police, your ambulance. Well, hang on, someone's rung those people to say, hey, something's going on here, which is the workplace. So something happens, and there's some people that work in those where it might be, hey, we've got a sales target, so I don't want that person to leave, or I've got to do this and I've got to do that. There's those sorts of things, and then you look at it and say, there's, you mentioned before, banking, right? So let's say, look at that. Sometimes when we sit there and you go, I'm dealing with that person, all of a sudden you deal with, so for example, me, that says, geez, I'm under that much financial pressure and stress and and you're going through this like as if it doesn't mean anything to you. And all of a sudden it's like there you go, and we'll talk a bit about that later, in where, hang on, and their level of frustration and their stress levels don't match what you're seeing. And the fact that we don't know who people are and how they react and what they think you should be saying compared to what you are saying, and what you and I would say, well, that's a really normal conversation, they take as an affront
or an offence.
And all of a sudden, something that starts here elevates to here really quickly. And it's those key indicators. How do we manage that? What are we doing? How do we set it up? Do we know that this person's coming in? How do we set up a room? How do we do this? How do we do that? They're the sorts of things that we cover off on.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, and that's it for the first topic. So if we talk about developing a violence and prevention plan, right? By the way, I've got the chat box working. I've struggled, but I've just worked out how to click it on.
Talking about high stress environments.
Oh, stress. Yeah. Because I had Leah come up going, hey, it's not working, Cole, so make it work, right? So, so that's all good. We've got it working and the question box working. So we're here to chat to you. But develop a violence and prevention plan. You know, let's have a conversation about, you know, and I love this little image. I think it's fantastic.
It's my favourite one.
Conducting a risk assessment. So,
So people would, because I deal with this all the time, I've sort of developed that. Oh, okay, great. Well, this, I can see things pretty. You're there to do a job. You know, you're not there as a safety risk. This isn't what you do all the time. You're there as your job, role, whatever it is that we're doing. We've got a varied platform here, but you keep your eyes on the prize. You know, we're there for the cheese, and it might be sales or it might be in service, whatever it is. That's your role. Our role in Persec Services is to sort of say, hey, absolutely, you don't need to become some sort of high security expert. You're there to do as good a job as you can do. Keep your eyes on the prize, eyes on the cheese. What we're there to do is to stick a little helmet on you to just sort of say, hey, whilst you're doing that, some of the things that you do have got risk, and how can we go through our risk controls and mitigate, eliminate, reduce those. And that's what our training basically provides, is that ability to be able to go, hey, you're there to do what you need to do and be as good at as you can. Let's put some things in place that'll sort of help you do that.
Have I got to write that mouse? It's called Maverick. Is that what's written on the Atlanta Top Gun? Well, it's pretty good on Tom Cruise, but it's true. It is that, and a lot of companies go, we need a risk assessment. So you know, our knowledge of WHS, OHS risk assessment is trying to prevent an accident from happening, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to prevent it, and that is human harm, if I can say that, right?
Yeah.
So I'll break an arm, break a leg.
Yeah.
Psychosocial's coming. It's a new, definitely a new hot topic that's it's been introduced as legislation. So we've got to make sure that we're creating this awareness around people's mental health, right?
Yeah.
But what you're doing is, and that's why I was so keen to do this webinar. It's not just mental health. It's around giving people the tools and the skills to actually, deal with the situation in the unlikely event, because that's what we've got to think about. In the unlikely event that something doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
And we don't want it to happen. But if one of my staff members who are, if I can say in our business, there's 12 people in our business, they're our family.
Yeah.
We're there to protect them. We want to make sure that we're giving them all the tools. I want them to perform 100%, but also outside of work or they work in clients' businesses. I want them to make sure that they feel comfortable walking into a client's business.
Yeah.
Or if they go for lunch, going into a High Point or a shopping centre or something like that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. When you look at that, what you're saying is that, so if you looked at it from a regulatory point of view, you say, well, if something bad was to happen, a WorkSafe would come in and look at the previous incidents. So what have you done? And if we had that under reporting where we said, oh, we haven't done any of that, they would be interviewing staff and they go, so tell me about how this escalated. Okay, great. Has that happened before? Oh, yeah, well, that happens all the time. That's just part of our job. Then they look at it and go, well, what have you as an organisation done from a training point of view? We had a 5-minute PowerPoint presentation that sort of just went this and this and this. And all along those ways, that's where, and WorkSafe is got a whole lot better at prevention of this, the education, rather than getting out the big stick. But when there's so many of those points that aren't getting done by organisations, that's where people fall down. And so that's why okay, great, let's analyse and be aware, hey, we have got issues. So now let's go on to creating an emergency response plan. So that is, and I've looked at a lot of policies and procedures in organisations where they sit there and they say, what do we do with this? And it's avoid. Okay, great, which is awesome. But you've also got other obligations as well. Let's say, like I do it, so real estate. Someone's there running an open for inspection. By themselves, I walk in as some guy that says, hey, I just want to walk in and have a look at this. And they say, oh, excuse me, sir, can you please provide your details? What for? It's open for inspection. I'm coming in. Okay, well, what do we do? And now, all of a sudden, we've got this little conflict. So, great, people skills. Now, what happens if I, as the person who has no idea of your policy and procedure, and I escalate this and go, well, I'm coming in regardless, and in I go. We sit there and say, well, the policy says to avoid it. And you go, well, okay, great. Does that mean I go and sit in my car? Well, hang on. You've got an obligation to look after someone's house. Retail, oh, well, someone's in the store and then, oh, okay, well, I'll go and hide out in the back. And next minute they're stealing everything and breaking stuff. And so or you might be in a supermarket and something's going on and you go, well, hey, I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to go and hide. And you go, well, you've left all the customers at risk.
We saw that in COVID over toilet paper.
Correct. So now you're sitting there going, well, do we let that? So there's that balance, and that's where a lot of organisations don't actually look at let's play out the scenarios of what could go wrong and how do we put in an emergency plan for that to happen. And that's one of the things that we do. We work through with them and say, well, tell us what you do. How does that work? Great. What are the things that have happened in the past? What do you see happening in the future? Right. Let's create a plan on how to prevent those.
We work with a lot of retailers, and I can tell you that some of the retailers, if someone's stealing, let them steal and walk out the store.
Yep.
Right. But there are people that have been in organisations for 5 years, 10 years, or have a personality where I look at you and I think I can take you on, and I'll go and take that particular person on, and then all of a sudden a knife gets pulled on them.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what you're talking about in relation to creating a plan? What would happen?
I think if I was an owner of an organisation and I didn't know what my staff would do in one of those situations, and it was up to them as a personality
To make it work.
make it work, you're at risk.
Yeah, 100%.
Because well, and even if it wasn't that, I'd chase them out of the store. Okay, great. What happens if you chase them out of the store and they trip, and as they're running across the road, they get hit by a car? Now all of a sudden we're talking about a coroner's inquest. We're talking this,
Yep.
and there's a lot in that we want to. That's what we're trying to avoid.
And all that just takes time away from running a business.
And the emotional and trauma and stress that it places on you. You think that that's what I would do. Well, that's part of what we do, is we sit there and say, I've gone into organisations, construction, the cleaning, after hours cleaning and stuff like that. And I look at some of the guys like, geez, if something happened, I'm standing behind you.
Yeah.
Because they're big guys that can take care of it. And I sort of sit there and say, I don't have to tell them how to avoid it. I sit there and say, hey, you need to avoid it, because if you do this, this, and this, we talk about self-defense and what it is and what it's not. And you just sit there and say, well, mate, hey, I know you can handle it from a physical point of view, but mate, you're going to investigations, courts, this, that, and from an organisation's point of view, you might get a don't come Monday.
Yeah.
So we don't want that as well. So we're just trying to empower staff to go, hey, how can we manage this where everyone's on the same page and there's not those issues?
I think there's two aspects here. I just want to put it out to the audience on the webinar. There's us dealing with internal people internally,
Yep,
right? And then there's also us dealing with us with outside the consumer, outside of our workplace. There could be a customer, or it could be a thief, or whatever it may be, or someone's just having a bad day, right?
Yeah.
So they've gone to the ATM machine, there's no money in there, and all of a sudden something's triggered them, and they're on a rampage. So number 3, pre-play, replay. What's this about?
This is one of my favourites. This is one of the really good parts of the training that we sort of do, and looking at situations. So the folder in our brain, I see something that happens right in front of me. The folder in my brain sits there and says, hey, I've dealt with this before. I know what I need to do. And it's the best response is this or that or that. That's what training does. It sort of goes, if I see something that I haven't seen before and I haven't really thought about before, the response I'm going to get is the folder in my brain. It goes searching. There's nothing in there. So I'm either going to freeze, or I'm going to act either inappropriately or appropriately. It's a toss of a coin. And that's what we want to try and avoid. So pre-play, replay is, if this happens, I would do that. If then this. And that's a constant. And so that's what we try and do, is sort of go into, that's why we sort of look at it. It's not off the shelf where we go, the training's the same. No, it's customized to what is it that you would experience, and how can we pre-play, replay scenarios so that if that occurs, the folder in your brain, your staff's brain, sits there and says, hey, I know what I should be doing here. I should be doing this. And that's where, if someone from outside comes in and looks and says, what did you do? What have you been? Hey, we went through this. Now, the unfortunate thing is that we're not all perfect. Colin, you might be, but the rest of us, we're like, well, if we did do something wrong, but at least from an organisation's point of view, we sit there and say, hey, we went through these scenarios and this is how we're meant to respond. And the better we get at that, so pre-play, replay is huge. And any organisation that's really good, continual improvement, that's what they do.
Well, it's no different to for sport, an AFL team, a football team, netball team.
2 points down, 2 minutes to go.
That's right. They practice reverse what we're going to do. They run scenarios. That's what training is about.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. So communicate.
Yeah. So when we're talking about our plan, I've gone into people's organisations and started off with, okay, great. have you got an emergency response plan in relation to occupational violence and aggression? And they go, yes, we have. Great. So then I say to the people sitting in the training, okay, great, what is it? And you sort of get those blank looks. And there's nothing worse, whether you be, remember, we get back into the school days when you look at the teachers going, okay, great, let's have a look at this question on the board. And you sort of get that feeling of, oh, please don't ask me. That's that empowered. What we want to try and do is to, when they sit there and say, I don't know, I think it's avoid or de-escalate or the, oh, hang on, what about this, this and this? I've just spent, you know, from someone who's in HR or people in culture, depending on where your organisation's at, spent months and months and months putting this policy together, but it doesn't get communicated out and people aren't, it's there, yeah, the policy, oh yeah, I could look it up on the computer, but that doesn't help when someone's confronted with something. And so what we do is we communicate, we help you communicate a document that says this is what we should be doing, to actually put it into practice to say, well, hey, this is what your policy is, and this is what your procedures are, and we help sort of tighten those up a bit if need be, but also, hey, to communicate that out to your people that actually need it. So a policy is fantastic, but it ain't great if it's just sitting in a folder or in a computer on a hard drive and no one really knows what it is. So
a good little exercise we do when we do policy workshops, or when I do them,
yeah.
Not that I do many because I've got a wonderful team that does it, but we'll ask, where is the emergency exit point in this business? And you look at the team and they go, it's this way,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that's what you're talking about here, right? So we had practice, drill and rehearse, right?
I heard one the other day where an emergency button was pushed because someone was facing an issue at a front counter, and got to the point where there was threats and stuff like that. So it was getting serious, and the panic button duress alarm was activated, and other people within, you're going, is that the doorbell to the back door? Or is that, you know, and going, and that's where you sit there and they say, okay, great, we've got our policy to a point and we've put stuff in place. Okay, great. And most organisations have, okay, great, we've got these are our security measures, we've got to be really onto this, but when it actually, have we communicated to get it to the point where, hey, we know, so that action's on, this is what we've got to do. When this happens, this is what we do. And unless people are aware of that and trained in it, well, the policies and those sorts of hard things just don't cut it.
So topic 3, think first before you react. And if we have a look here, you'll see critical thinking. So let's go through some of your analogy of, you know, critical thinking.
So what I try and do is I basically take people through a scenario, and we sort of put it in within a police scenario, then I change it into other world scenarios where this is what we teach people about critical thinking. And so one of the good analogies, and limited with time here, but let's look at it at a fire. So you say, there's a fire. Well, when you look at it and say, well, there's stages of the fire, well, it's just smouldering away. Can we go in and do something about that? Yes, we could. We could go and stamp on it, put it out. And now, well, the fire's got bigger. What are we going to do? Well, hang on, we're not going to run in and try and do that. We're going to do this. Or what can we do? Oh, we can cordon and contain it, and we can isolate it and keep people away. Well, we use that analogy to then talk about someone who's displaying violence and aggression in a workplace. At what stage can we go and try and
put the fire
deal
out.
with that? Put the fire out.
Yep.
How do we do that? And what do we do? And where do we do that from? No good going, I'm going to go and put this fire out, and all of a sudden, oh, hang on, it's got bigger in a hurry, and oh, now I'm stuck in the middle of it, and that's no good. So we talk about that, and then it's like, okay, great. Now, what's the worst thing that could happen by this? Oh, geez, I didn't think about that. Who's going to be looking at this? If this goes wrong, what would happen if I did this? So I show them how, mainly, you know, large organisations that look at critical incidents. How do we manage that? And then at the end of the session, we run their scenarios and say, okay, great, if we were doing this, see how we did this over here? Why is that any different to yours? What would you do here? And we just marry the two up. And so that's what I was sort of talking about, is it taking all that stuff that I've been teaching people. Why should someone learn how to look after a prime minister because they're a VIP? Oh, what are we? What is my family in a workplace, your family in a workplace, your staff in a workplace? Why aren't they VIPs? Why can't we teach them the same sort of stuff?
100%, and that goes back to this replay, replay.
Yeah, and that's what we do. So we sort of go, okay, here's what it is. This is the critical thinking. Here's now pre-play, replay. Let's fill that folder in their brain. Okay, great. If this happened, what are the consequences of doing it wrong? What are the outcomes we want to do? And we pre-play and replay them.
Okay, and around the
so hierarchy of safety. Yeah. So we talk about that where we sit there and say, well, I don't want to go in and run into that fire because I could get myself hurt. So we've got a hierarchy of safety. We go, well, am I going to run in and tackle that person because they're stealing from us? Am I going to go and jump in front of someone who's doing ABC? Well, whatever it is, we want to make sure that we look after number one.
Yep.
But as a close second of that hierarchy of safety is, hey, I'm not going to run in and put out that fire because it's dangerous. Colin, you do it.
Yeah.
You know, we want to create a culture of great team culture at KBA, at whatever organisation you work at, but that, hey, if it's dangerous for me, it's dangerous for the people I work with. And so what's our plan around that? And policy and procedure doesn't cover that. That's where the training comes in. Training has to cover that. So then we go, well, have we got an obligation to, if something bad's happening, even though I'm the person who's aggressive and I'm standing at your front counter and is someone else going to come in? Have we got a hierarchy of safety to someone else? Have you still got a hierarchy of safety to me? Oh, we get 10 blokes to come out and jump on me and all of a sudden get a broken leg and this and that. Have you got a duty of care to look after me? Yeah, absolutely we have. So there's all those sorts of things that we work through to sit there and say, hey, this is what could go wrong. This is how we can fix it, based on policies, procedure, the law, a hierarchy of safety, those sorts of things.
And look, I know I jumped a slide, but this is a slide managing ego. So this is it. This is where people muscle up and go, well, I've got this covered.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that. And so road rage, let's talk about that one we were talking about. So there's the incident you were talking about the other day where they had a road rage incident. Guy gets out of his car to go and confront the other driver. At that time, someone jumps into their car and steals it with their 2-year-old in the car.
Yeah.
Now, it's gone from a managing their ego. What? You did that. You shouldn't let me in. Why didn't you wave? Whatever it is. And it's just constant I'm driving on the roads these days. And I spent a bit of time helping my mates in the car. Well, hang on, I do this. And my family, all managing our ego in stress. And hey, I'm not sitting here saying that I'm
perfect.
Not by a long shot. I've got that ability to get angry in a hurry. I just know that's that pre-play, replay. And I know that, hey, if I don't control and manage my own ego in this situation, I'm going to escalate it. So if someone bumps into me, we bump into in the street, and I've got a choice. I can sit there and say, I can either de-escalate this by managing my own ego and letting you manage yours. That's what we're talking about. And so that incident, what was the next part is the amazing part of ego is that when they realized that the car was stolen with the 2-year-old in it, the guys that were fighting, he actually jumped into the car with the guy he was fighting with, and they went off to chase the guy. So it was just, mate, 1 minute you're out of the car trying to punch on, next minute you're working together to try and
save the situation. Yeah,
it's being able to talk about those egos. Now everyone knows that that's the common sense part of it. But let's put it into those workplace scenarios. I don't know what you would do. I don't know what you would say, but you need to know. So let's pre-play, replay all these sorts of scenarios. How would you manage this? Because how you would manage it and how I would manage it are going to be different. Still get a great outcome, but there's no one size that fits all. So we talk a lot about that, and especially we do a lot of stuff in fleet management. So because of the police driver training background, people go, oh, can you get in the car and deal with people who do this? I go, no, but what I can do is come in and let's talk through your fleet. We're on the road all the time. How do we talk about hangback distance? How do we talk about this? We talk about that to create a safer environment so that we don't have road rage. You don't have people ringing up your organisation going, hey, I had one of your guys on the road doing this, blah, blah, blah. That's part of the training that we can sort of tailor to a lot of different organisations.
You just got to drive up the Hume Highway and have 10 trucks up the backside and realise, like, you know what, there was a time in my life where you've given me a bit of abuse, but now it's just like,
and that's part of it.
I look more for kangaroos now than that, right? But we're going to move into ways to support and create safer workplaces, and this is about what everyone in this webinar really needs to embrace and take away. And if they decide to have a further conversation, engage your services, this is what it's about. Know your role.
So we talk about with people that when these incidents occur, knowing your role, and especially if you've got more than one person, as we've said to you, oh, here's the alarm panic duress button activated. Well, the person who activates needs to know their role. The person that's in the back office needs to know their role. They go, well, I need to go and make sure that people from the public don't come in where the fire is going off. We need to isolate and contain that. Or we need to know that, someone else needs to ring emergency services. Someone else. So we need people within the organisation to know our role and be able to play that role. So again, back to that pre-play, replay, being able to know your role and then manage that and actually make it work is what we're after.
Oh, look, I'm sure there's been incidents where companies have got people that have got that role of importance, but when something violent happens, right, they're not to be seen.
Yeah.
Right. So it's again that I can't emphasize the importance of that training and that backup process.
Yeah.
So as you're saying, know who you're dealing with. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that I talk a bit about this. If someone, a female, said something to me, I'd be like, yes, ma'am, absolutely, because I know that my mum would probably, if I didn't speak nicely and with respect, I'd be still waiting for the clip over the ears. Whereas someone else might sit there and say, well, you can't talk to me like that because you're this or you're that. We have no idea what people's upbringing, how they look at it. Someone might look at it, so people actually go looking for fights. You might be in cities, and there's so many different people's and different upbringings, cultures, positions in life. We have no idea who we're dealing with and what they would think is an acceptable thing to do. So what we do is we deal with people skills and with tactics to be able to manage that so we don't put ourselves further into the fire when it goes off.
And we do a lot of recruiting. So recruiting is a big part. It's been hard to get staff, for lots of organisations out there. And we know that, some people have put staff on because they physically need to put people on, and the behaviour is not as it should be, right?
Yeah.
And I did a conference on the weekend, and I basically said, 1st of July, new financial year, if you have people in your organisation that are toxic or, because things go from bad to worse, and you've seen that many times. So number 3, avoidance and de-escalation are the key.
Yeah. So that's where we've sort of talked a bit about this, so I won't go into it in much more detail, but you look at it and say, what does that actually mean and how do we actually get that? And what we do within the training is we make, a lot of the times when I'm there, and I sort of create sometimes a lot more questions than I solve or that I answer, because, and that's a good thing, because when we leave, it's not like you can have training where, okay, go there, and then you forget about it. As you were saying to me, one of the best things that you can ever say to me is that, hey, when that happened, I thought of you. Now, hopefully you didn't just think of me, but you thought about the
situation,
and that, hey, that brings me to training, and that's what we want to be able to do, is to sit there and say, well, what does avoidance of de-escalation mean? Because they're great words, but what does that actually mean? And that's what we want to do, is from the training. And then out of that, mate, is empowered, not scared. What we want to be able to do, nothing better from my point of view, from a trainer in creating safer workplaces, is having the knowledge to be able to help organisations make their staff, help their staff feel empowered. And that feeling, as I said to you before, the feeling of, oh, I don't know what to do, when it comes in that, and in any situation, someone rings on the phone, I'm not sure how to answer this, I'm not sure how to do this, that ability to be able to say, okay, great, hey, I know what to do here, I know what to say here, I know what I'm going to do here, I know what to do there. That's a much better feeling of, if I'm going to walk down the street, I'm going to do this. If I'm going to get on a train, I'm going to do this. If I'm going to sit in a restaurant, I'm going to do that. All those sorts of things that, as I said, I did that for VIPs, for all sorts of people. Why can't we do it for us?
Who were some of those VIPs, Kev?
Also, with the last job, I looked after Julia Gillard, who was a fantastic person. So I looked after her at the Drawn Grand Final. Taken Premier Sean Brumby overseas to India. I went trips with him and looked after him for a long time. Kevin Rudd took him around the Black Saturday fires. Dalai Lama had a look at him. Some of the royals that have come over. US ambassadors, Israeli ambassadors, so lots of different people, but it's sort of, as I said, I was there with all this sort of stuff, and I'm looking after them, and I'm thinking, does my wife know what to do? Do my kids know what to do? Does my sisters, do they know what to do when they're doing it? Because I hear things and I say, oh, there's nothing I could have done, and I'm going, geez, I'm looking at that. I go, mate, there's 10 things you could have done. They didn't do them, not through any other thing, but the fact that they just didn't know. So that's what we want.
And that's hindsight, really.
Correct. Yeah. And let's try and replay that. Let's not make it hindsight. Let's make it foresight.
So before we finish up, have you got some questions you want to throw at Kev? And while you're writing some of those questions in, when I was introduced to Kev, one of the things that in our business, Key Business Advisors, is during COVID, we were hit pretty hard like most businesses. But one of the things that we learned was the power of collaborating. The power of collaborating with other industries that complement what we do. And I've got to say, what you do when you're trying to package that up, because it sort of doesn't fit in the, OH&S area where someone hurts themselves from a harm point of view.
Yeah. The
mental health side of things, yes, that's another category, but you sort of sit over here, which is a bit different, which is all about the proactive response, right?
Yeah.
So it's been an absolute honour, to get you to do this today, and this will be recorded. It'll be up on our website, and I know that you'll get it up on your website as well. But I think this is an awareness thing that what you're offering, really, based on the research we've done, doesn't exist out there. But to get a person with experience, 30 odd years of experience of what you've done in the police force, in protecting people, I think is just absolutely fantastic. So do we have any questions? Anyone in the audience want to give us some questions? And we haven't had any yet, so they're probably all thinking about it.
I had some issues with
No, it's all good. I got it all fixed. Right. Yeah, that's my job. Yeah, so
well done.
Beautiful. But if you want to get in contact with Kev, right? There's his mobile, there's his email address, his website. He's a team of at the moment of 4 + 2, if that makes sense, right? So as the work comes in, he wants to expand his business. But I think what you do is, as I said, is a bit different to what we've seen out there, and we're having a bit of fun together doing this. Yeah,
and I appreciate, as I said, mate, from my point of view, and this is what the Key Business Advisors does, and was doing for us, is that I've sort of got all this, I know what to say and I know what to do and I know how to help people, but it's that marketing of it and getting it out there and spreading the word and stuff like that. And that's where, from our point of view, it's been great to deal with you and to have this opportunity. I've never done one of these before, so if I've come across as nervous, I apologise, because it is a bit different. I love that face-to-face, in a room, interacting with people. So hopefully, there's a number of different ways that we can do it. As I said, it's not here just just the training, it's the same for everyone. No, we customize everything to make it fit your organisation, what you do, and the specifics of that. So hopefully that comes across in what we've covered off on today.
So Kevin says his first webinar. No, you would never have known. You did a brilliant job. And I said to him, don't worry, we'll do it together. I'll hold your hand, right? All I did was just help support you doing it. You
appreciate it.
Absolutely, you've got the knowledge, you know what to do. And, you know, Google reviews are a big thing. So if you really enjoy what you've spoken about.
Apparently
today,
I've just learned that from you.
Yeah, I'd love you to give him a Google review. We had ours up there. We don't need our Google review. This is all about you. And I want to wish you all the very, very best. No one's put any questions out there, so that
you must have covered it all.
You've covered it all, or you've given them something to think about.
Yeah, that'd be good. That's all it is. It's just hopefully people do get to do that. Just think about it, and if someone comes up with any questions later on, happy to. It's not when you're not on the clock. You can just send me any sort of message, and happy to help out in any.